Tilea's Troubles, Part 86. A letter sent to several many Tilean city-states. Autumn 2403. Note: this letter contains its Pavonan author's account of events. Just how close his account tallies with actual events, I shall leave for you to decide. The pictures should be considered clues as to what truly occurred. This to be sent to all legitimate and honourable rulers of Tilea, for their better understanding of the foul treachery performed at Verzo this autumn of the year 2403, and furthermore, so that they may know how the Lord of Pavona, his Grace Duke Guidobaldo Gondi, offered his help and protection to all the citizens of that realm in their time of dire need and great sorrow. Upon returning from Rimas, and having learned from his subjects of the discovery of the remains of a camp near unto Scorsese, the Duke rode post-haste from the security of his ancient and noble city of Pavona with his gentlemen at arms to investigate. It was quickly apparent that goblins had indeed utilized the camp in question, no doubt being the same force that held Scorsese to ransom, while the noble Duke was abroad, leading the pursuit of the brute tyrant Rasgaboldaguts. Keen to exact retribution, and to cleanse Tilea of goblin kind, so that no more realms might suffer at their foul hands, and without a care for the meagre size of his own force, Duke Guidobaldo rode forthwith in pursuit. The trail led unto the realm of Verzo, and when the outriders reported encountering several many citizens fleeing from trouble, Duke Guidobaldo feared the goblins had already set upon this realm, perhaps this time employing the violence they had threatened against Scorsese. Upon questioning the Verezan citizens, however, it soon became clear that another kind of destruction had been visited upon them. The citizens reported that soldiers, flying the colours of Porta Maggiore, had arrived in strength at the estates to the north of the city of Verzo, announcing that they were there to take supplies that had been promised by Lord Lucha Vescusi. The soldiers then claimed Lord Lucha was still with the Grand Alliance army near unto Trantio, engaged in the war against the vampires, but that his orders were clear, that the army of Porta Maggiore was permitted, by his command, to take whatever it required for its sustenance during this time of war, in return for the protection it provided the realm. The citizens complained that they themselves had been given no such instructions, instead having been ordered to provide the army of the VMC with supplies stockpiled for that very purpose, which they had already done only 2 weeks previously. Furthermore, they asserted, noble Lord Lucha had already returned to their realm a week before, and so on that matter the soldiers were at best mistaken, at worst lying. The soldiers ignored these claims, asserting it was the citizens who were lying, and redoubled their demands. Then, when met with stubborn refusal, they began violently plundering everything of worth and value they could lay their hands upon. News quickly reached Lord Lucha, loving father to all in Verzo, who quickly gathered what meagre forces remained in his realm after his considerable contribution to the army of the Grand Alliance, and rode out to give battle to the robbers. As well as his riders, being light horsemen from a wild region of the border princes who had served him for many a year and were glad to dwell in a more civilized land, he commanded a company of crossbowmen, stout citizen militia all, and the one gun remaining in his small arsenal, an ancient piece, kept serviceable despite its archaic design. He also sent word to the halfling militia of Tilean that they should muster and move as rapidly as possible to join him. Upon arriving, Lord Lucha found a not inconsiderable force of what appeared to be Porta Maggiorans arrayed before him, including a large body of brigand bravi flying the personal banner of Lord Alessio Falcone, presumably a part of Falcone's not inconsiderable household forces, as well as a body of mercenary crossbowmen, apparently Arabian. perhaps being a lingering remnant of Gedik Mamidou's Sons of the Desert. Such bravi and mercenaries, by their very nature, might well be expected to indulge in plundering, but then Lord Lucha saw, to his horror, that among the robbers was a body of mounted men-at-arms, liveried in the blue and white of Porto Maggiore, well armed, armoured, and mounted upon horses of quality. That gentleman might stoop to such wicked and ignoble action was offensive to Lord Lucha, as it also subsequently seemed to Duke Guidobaldo, when he received the report. The two realms, Pavona and Porto Maggiore, had been granted almost exactly similar liveries by accident of history, yet here was an action that demeaned the colours blue and white. Only ancient pride prevented our Duke from declaring there and then that he would change the livery of his own soldiers. He knew full well, however, that if any should change, it ought to be the Porto Maggiorans, for it was they, by their own actions, or so it seemed at the time, who had disgraced the colours. Lord Lucha's crossbowmen came on as best they could, to support the fast-moving lord and his body of light horse, but the Arabians cut down many of them before they could even span their weapons. In return, the old cannon felled 2 of the enemy's heavy horsemen, their armour as butter to a ball of iron, no matter how ancient the piece that hurled it. Knowing he and his light horse could not hope to prevail in direct combat against such armoured riders as the enemy possessed, Lord Lucha led his men in a merry dance against the foe, adding their own shortbow's arrows to the quarrels and round shot of the rest of his force, buying time, so that when the halflings arrived, led by the famous Petit Rosso himself, Roberto Capuccio, the battle was still yet to be decided. More of the enemy's riders fell as the halflings proved their skill at archery, and while the regular archers of Turenne engaged in an exchange of arrows with the Arabians, the bravi, carrying Lord Alessio's banner, were badly stung by the Verzo crossbowmen and turned to flee. The halflings, made bold by their successors, advanced, only to be severely mauled by the piercing power of the Arabians' quarrels. Faltering, they could only watch with horror as the enemy's mounted men-at-arms charged and destroyed the Verzo crossbowmen. Then, just when the old cannon was needed, when the enemy had revealed the flank of their body to its muzzle, it failed to fire. The desperate crew managed to make it ready again, and it did successfully fire, but its ball overshot the foe. The men-at-arms, perhaps angered by what the gun had done to them earlier in the fight, now charged the piece itself and mercilessly cut down the crew. Lord Lucha, seeing his crossbowmen and artillery piece destroyed, and his brave halflings falling back upon the flank, suddenly saw an opportunity to inflict hurt and charge the bravi who had rallied and reformed close enough for him to reach. Once again they fled, as soon as he launched his charge, and he soon realized his error, for in attempting to close upon the foe, he had opened his riders to a charge from the enemy's remaining mounted men-at-arms. His pursuit faltered as he attempted to regain order, then turned to flight when the enemy did indeed come thundering towards him. He and his light horse, who would normally have easily outstripped such a heavily armoured foe, were so disordered by casualties and their failed charge against the bravi that they could not escape. To a man, the noble Lord Lucha included, they were hacked down and trampled into the dirt. And so it was that Lord Lucha was killed by thieves and murderers while fighting to save his citizens from those same wicked men. Made furious by all that he heard, Duke Guidobaldo immediately rode on, in the hope of closing with the supposed Porto Maggiorans himself, but they had already fled the scene of their crime, further proving themselves to be base rogues. The Duke found only one of them remaining, a fool who could barely stand for having drunk too much of the looted wine. When this man was questioned, the truth was revealed, and it proved no less horrible than that which had been believed before. The murdering looters were not Porto Maggiorans at all, but rather had deliberately disguised themselves as such. They were hired soldiers of the VMC, most likely sent thither to stir up dissension between Tilean states, and at the same time to take more than that which had been agreed. Northerners are well known for their cupidity, being in many ways no better than Sartos and pirates, only dressing up most of their robberies as legitimate trade, with papers, tickets, and receipts to mask the true nature. Here they had gone one terrible step further, for they had clothed themselves as Portamajorans, even carrying Lord Alessio's banner, so that they might shift the blame for their depredations, despite having declared themselves to be allies of both Portamaggiore and Verzo, willing to march north to assist them against brutes and vampires. In truth, just as they came last year to Campanefro in the realm of Raverno, their true goals were to raise and plunder, rape and murder. And if not this worst of all possibilities, then at best the officers of the VMC had lost control of a significant portion of their mercenary forces. Perhaps their obsession with profit had led them to cut corners and hire scum little better than corsairs and outlawed bravi. Whatever the truth, whatever the VMC's motivations, our noble Duke Guidobaldo knew he could not leave the citizens of Verzo leaderless and without military protection. Not only would they be open to further abuse at the hands of the VMC soldiery, but also, in this time of war against vampires, brutes, and even scavenging goblins, they might suffer at the hands of a multitude of others. He also recognised that after the ravaging of his own realm by Boldegot's double army, and the battering of his army in that struggle, as well as the fact that his son was fighting against the vampires with the Grand Alliance in command of most of Pavona's soldiery, that he had insufficient forces to guard both Pavona and Verzo effectively, which is why he has offered all Verezan citizens shelter in his own realm, welcome to settle in the ruined villages and towns left in the wake of Boldegot's rampage, thus repopulating those settlements. Furthermore, Duke Guidobaldo even has in his possession a letter from Lord Vespucci, in which the late Verezan ruler proposed that the two of them ought to lay aside all past grievances so that they might more effectively support each other in the mutual defence of their realms in this time of emergency. Having received this, touched the Duke's heart, especially as Lord Lucha most likely lay dead before the Duke even read his words. His sadness was only magnified by the plight of the poor people of Verzo. So it is that right now the people of Verzo, their goods and chattels, their livestock and servants, are being encouraged to travel to the safety of Pavona, so that they might both survive and prosper under Duke Guidobaldo's protective care. All praise be given to the great God More, whose embrace will comfort us through the long eons after our lives, for working through his humble servant, Duke Guidobaldo Gondi, to ensure the people are also kept safe before they part this mortal coil.